Hi there, this is Chris, Chaplain Account Motor Legends. A little bit different today. I want to talk about the Klim Marrakesh. That's a jacket that we've been marketing for quite a few years, but with a number of new competitors on the market, what I want to talk about today is whether it is still the best high airflow jacket out there. Anyway, if you like what you hear, if you like what you see, please don't forget to like and subscribe. For information, we are recording this, I think today's date is Sunday, the 7th of June, that's 2026. Now clearly Motor Legends didn't invent the Marrakesh jacket, Klim did, but we did contribute towards making it famous. It's now Klim's biggest selling jacket worldwide, and I suppose what we did was to help them see its potential. And it is a phenomenal bit of kit. It is almost without doubt the most cosseting AA rated motorcycle jacket you'll ever wear. But whilst important, that's not its USP, nor is the fact that it flows a huge amount of air, which of course it does. What singles out the Marrakesh is its ability to comfortably accommodate layers. And that very simply is a reflection upon the amount of stretch that's built into its chassis. Now, normally when you introduce large amounts of something like Elastane into a garment's outer chassis, you weaken the fabric, making it less abrasion resistant and more likely to get a lower rating under EN 17092. But what Klim has done with the Marrakesh is weave the stretch material into a hugely strong base of 1000 denier Cordura. Now, nobody else uses 1000 denier Cordura in a motorcycle garment. Even Rukka will only ever start with a 750 denier fabric. But the result of the way that Klim has put this jacket together is that it is super stretchy, yet still meets the AA standard for abrasion resistance. And that, I've got to say, is pretty impressive. And so you end up with a jacket that nobody needs to be concerned about from an abrasion resistance perspective, but that you can still layer under such that it can be worn in the very coldest conditions without compromising comfort. But the beauty of the Klim layering system, as we call it, is that when the weather changes and the sun starts to do its job, you can remove the layers and be comfortably cool in the way that your mates in their laminated jackets never will be. Now, we have customers here who wear their Marrakesh jackets all year round, and we can see that you could potentially do this. Although we think that the Marrakesh system lends itself more to riding in the summer and the kind of changeable conditions that you can come across when touring, rather than to riding through the winter. For us, it's the versatility of the Marrakesh that makes it so interesting. So, get off the ferry in Santander and head up into the mountains, and the imperative might well be to insulate body heat. So you put on all your layers, plus of course a stretchy held waterproof jacket on top if the heavens do open. Head down into the plains and warmer weather, and what you might want is more airflow. So you remove the layers, and that's what you'll get. If it gets a bit chilly later in the day as the sun starts to dip, you could put on your super thin Zephyr windproof. Ride longer into the evening, you might want to put your down jacket back on. Like this, the Marrakesh really can be the perfect solution for riding in all the kind of weather conditions that you might find yourself in when you're on tour. Now, we've been working with the Marrakesh for quite a few years now. Somebody from Klim once told me that we were responsible for over 50% of the world's production of it. But whether that's still true or not, we've got to know it pretty well and have had almost every question about it answered by our customers. And so we thought it might be worthwhile attempting to answer some of the questions that people sometimes put to us. Anyway, here goes. So how much air does the Marrakesh actually flow? Now, when you lay eyes on the Marrakesh for the first time, it doesn't necessarily look as though it flows a ton of air. And I think I would have to concede that in towns and at speeds much below, 30 miles an hour, there may be better and cheaper ways to stay cool, such as a traditional mesh jacket. But the problem with most mesh jackets is they feature mesh paneling only in specific areas. On such jackets, the cooler air will enter at the front, whilst on some, the warm air coming off the body may be able to exit through the mesh panels on the back too. But there will be far lower levels of breathability in the non-mesh areas, and that's crucial because that's where you'll overheat. The cool air won't reach those parts of your body. In those areas, the evaporative cooling process that is necessary for sweating to take place will be impeded. By contrast, the beauty of the Marrakesh is that every single panel, that's the chest, the core, the shoulders and the sleeves, they will all allow the oncoming cooler air to reach the body. This air will circulate around the body. The hot air that needs to escape from the body in the form of vaporous sweat can then exit from the rear of a jacket and again through the back of the sleeves and so on. The faster you ride, the more effective this will be. Now, some people have opined that they think that something like a Nox or Pando jacket would be cooler. I'm talking about one of those jackets that holds the armour tight to the body, but that features mesh panelling to allow air to reach the skin. But we think those people are wrong. The air passing through the mesh might cause you to feel that you are cooling down, but the more solid, clingy areas, especially where the armour is held, will not breathe at all. And so actually your body temperature will not drop in those areas. What you need in really hot weather is for cool air to enter the jacket and pass around the body to cool it down before it exits at the back. And that's what you get on the Marrakesh that you don't get with jackets that are only part mesh and that cling tightly to the body in certain areas. Another question we often get is, how protective is the Marrakesh? Well, for us, and we don't want to sound glib, the answer to that question is that it's protective enough. There will always be more protective jackets, but there are not many that will flow this much air, and there are none that will do so and be as comfortable. Now, one of the things that we talk a lot about at Motor Legends is the mistaken view that EN 17092 is a safety standard. Emphatically, it is not. It is a very basic and rather crude test of the abrasion and tear resistance of the garment's outer shell. And whilst an outer fabric's abrasion resistance is not unimportant, it's often actually the armour that protects you in an accident. As they say, it's not the sliding that hurts, it's the stopping. In truth, in most road accidents, there doesn't tend to be a lot of sliding anyway. Public roads are not smooth like racetracks, so when we hit the deck, we tend to tumble and we roll, and then we hit something and come to an abrupt halt. And although we are often not aware of the job that our armour has done, if we walk away from an accident, it will often have been our armour that has saved the day. The problem, it seems to me, is that after an accident, we might notice the damage done to the outer garment. But what we don't see is the role our armour has played, not only in terms of impact protection, but also, it has to be said, in terms of abrasion resistance. And that's because the armour in our shoulders and elbows and back will always be way more abrasion resistant than the jacket's outer shell. Now, the bad news here, I'm afraid, is that the Marrakesh's armour is increasingly looking a little bit out of date. A few years ago, the Level 1 D30 Ghost that was fitted into the current Marrakesh when it was launched seemed revolutionary. Well, now there's Level 2 Ghost, but better still, there's Level 2 Diablo, which meets the higher level, but that, almost unbelievably, is probably even more comfortable than Level 1 Ghost. And indeed, it is with this in mind that we offer a buyback scheme that allows you to swap out the Marrakesh's Level 1 armour for Level 2. The extra cost is a heavily subsidised £70. Now, that's not nothing, but it's certainly less than the £110 that the Level 2 Ghost and the Level 2 Rayon back protector upgrade would normally cost. We'll come back to the whole protection thing later when we talk about alternatives to the Marrakesh. But with Diablo Level 2 armour and an upgraded back protector, we think that the Marrakesh is kind of up to the job. Another thing that people sometimes ask is whether the Marrakesh is any good in the rain. Does it give you any cover when it rains? And the answer is no, it's bloody useless. Klim claims that the Marrakesh has a durable water repellent coating, what is known as a DWR. But whilst that may be the case, the rain will quickly bypass that and enter the jacket through the loosely woven fabric, meaning that a DWR does next to nothing. In truth, however, why would anybody expect anything different of a jacket that flows a lot of air? The first thing to say here is that in any scenario, not just a motorcycling one, a waterproof layer is always best worn as the final outer piece. No sailor or climber, after all, would ever wear the waterproof inside the thermal layer. Now, for reasons of convenience and for the aesthetics, the membrane in motorcycle jackets is nearly always fixed into the garment's internals, and that clearly is understandable. But whether your jacket has a laminated membrane or a drop liner one, in heavy rain, the outer shell will absorb some moisture. Less so perhaps in a laminated jacket, more so in a drop liner one. But any motorcycle jacket will get wet to a certain degree in the rain. But that won't happen if a waterproof is worn as the outer layer. So, let's say you're riding along in your Marrakesh. It starts to rain. You stop and you put your stretchy held waterproof on. It then proceeds to rain heavily for the next 3 hours. You stop for lunch, and when you do, your Marrakesh underneath will be totally dry. You can wear it into the restaurant in the way that you wouldn't be able to in your damp and dripping Rukka or Klim Kodiak. Of course, we accept that stopping at the roadside to put your waterproof jacket on can be a pain, especially if you're riding with your mates who don't have to stop. But don't forget, when the sun comes out and the mercury rises, it will be you who has the last laugh. A question that seems to be coming up increasingly is whether the Marrakesh is any good or can be worn with an airbag vest. Now, in our view, there is no better jacket for wearing over an airbag than the Marrakesh. And that's firstly because it contains so much stretch. If your airbag goes off, it will do no harm to you or the jacket. But there's another reason why the Marrakesh is so perfect for an airbag. And that's because it will serve to mitigate one of the greatest weaknesses of an airbag, namely its impact on breathability. Not to put too fine a point on it, in really hot weather, an airbag runs the risk of doing more harm than good. And that's because it can cause you to overheat, which in extremis can lead to debilitating heat exhaustion. A jacket like the Marrakesh will serve to maximize airflow to the body, thus helping overcome one of the greatest weaknesses of an airbag vest. It will also help, although perhaps not quite to the same degree, if you're one of those people who wear an airbag on the outside of your jacket. When people come into the shop, one of the most common questions we get asked when people are looking at the Marrakesh is, what are the alternatives? Now, on one level, any old mesh jacket represents an alternative, but traditional mesh jackets don't flow, as we've discussed, as much air. Some of them are not awfully protective, and almost none of them will have the stretch component that allows layers to be comfortably accommodated. Another option would be any adventure suit where the membrane can be removed and perhaps worn on the outside. Such jackets very much embody the layering approach, but however large their vents, they won't flow as much air as the Marrakesh. They will inevitably be very bikey in their look, and they won't be anywhere near as comfortable. Now, we've already touched upon those off-road style jackets that clamp the armour to the body, and that they do this is to their advantage from a protective standpoint. But they simply don't allow as much air to flow around the body in hot weather as, for example, the Marrakesh does. But as an aside, we also don't think these kinds of jackets are very practical, especially when you're on tour. Now, inevitably, what you have to do, unless it's really hot, is wear your thermal layers on the outside. When you stop for lunch, you have to remove the outer layers. Then, to be comfortable in the restaurant, you have to take off your armour-holding jacket. Then you put your fleece or down jacket back on to go into the restaurant. When you come out of the restaurant, you take your fleece off, you put your protective layer on, then you put your thermal layers back on. It's all a bit of a faff. The truth is that this type of armour-holding vest and jacket were never designed for riding on the road. They were created specifically for off-road riding. We just don't think the idea works as well on the blacktop. Now, the nearest competitor to the Marrakesh is the recently introduced Belstaff Tamar. It really is a very close copy, and interestingly, it betters the Klim in a number of respects. Coming in more sizes, you stand a better chance of getting the perfect fit. Like the Marrakesh, it is AA rated, but it comes as standard with level 2 Diablo in the elbows and shoulders, as opposed to the Marrakesh's level 1 Ghost, although it does not come with a back protector. Now, the Belstaff badge says something very different to the Klim one, and that will be important to some people. But at this point in time, it has to be acknowledged that the Belstaff is still somewhat unproven in the way that the Klim jacket is. The Tamar is every bit as comfortable as the Marrakesh, but it only comes in 2 colourways as opposed to the Klim's 5. Which brings us to a jacket that is very different to the Marrakesh, but that is again in some respects better, and that is the Rukka Air VT. Now, the VT does the same job as the Marrakesh, but it's quite a different kettle of fish. It's made from a 500 denier Cordura, but because the chassis contains no stretch fibres at all, it still meets the AA standard for abrasion resistance. As a consequence of its construction, however, it is not elasticated, and so it does not naturally allow you to layer beneath it. But to compensate for this, it comes with adjustable side adjusters that, if anything, do an even better job of altering the jacket's internal volume. Anecdotally, we would suggest that it flows about the same air as the Marrakesh. One obvious difference is that it embodies clearly a very different aesthetic, more specifically a rather more adventure-focused one. With its longer drop and lower flat pockets, it kind of shouts BMW GS. But the VT doesn't get close to the Marrakesh in terms of comfort. That's partially down to the lack of stretch, but of greater impact here is probably the heavyweight Rukka armour. It is Rukka's own bespoke Level 2 D30. This armour is far more absorbent of the energy of an impact than pretty much any Level 2 armour out there. The pure size of it also means that there is a greater chance of it being where you need it when you hit something. Its level and sheer size mean that it will also contribute to abrasion resistance better than just about any other Level 2 armour if you do end up going down the road. No two ways about it, the VT is the most protective high airflow jacket on the planet. And for Rukka people, and for many others too, that may well be the deciding factor. Rukka people may also like the fact, of course, that the VT can be zipped into a matching Rukka pant. Now, there are a couple of things about the VT that we should mention. It comes in 11 sizes, and that means that rare will be the individual we cannot make the jacket work for. In terms of colourways, however, it comes in only standard Rukka black and grey. Next year, very excitingly, we might even get a green one. One final point worth making is that Rukka does another jacket called the Air Carvic that shares the VT's construction, but it's not adjustable at the sides, so whilst it might work for some as just a summer jacket, it doesn't work anywhere near as well when it comes to layering. Which brings us finally to the Klim Induction Pro. Now, this is a great jacket. In some ways, it's kind of a Marrakesh on steroids. Let me explain. 30 to 40% of the induction is constructed from the same material as the Marrakesh. That is to say, a 1000 denier Cordura interwoven with stretch. The rest of the jacket comprises a super strong open weave mesh that flows even more air. Now, what this means is that the induction is better than the Marrakesh in really hot weather. In fact, Klim acknowledges that they produced the induction specifically for those who ride in places like Texas, Alabama and Georgia. But whilst that's a positive, the Induction Pro is going to perhaps flow too much air for those of us who do most of our riding in the UK or Northern Europe. The fact is that if you can get cold in Marrakesh as soon as the sun goes down behind the clouds, you could well freeze in an induction. Yet, it's almost as comfortable as the Marrakesh, and it comes as standard with Level 2 armour. Now, as an aside, its fit is slightly more relaxed than that of the Marrakesh. So, if a Marrakesh is a little too tight on you, an induction in the same size might not be. The main problem with the induction is that, like the Marrakesh, it comes in just 6 sizes. Now, we could also have included the Klim Baja S4 in this comparison, but it's pretty much identical to the induction, but with its off-road fit, we reckon it's just too baggy for road riding. We're also not a fan of the fact that a heavy-duty off-road jacket like this should only come with Level 1 armour. We just don't understand it. And that's why we are no longer offering the Baja S4. Of course, that doesn't mean that it won't be the right choice for some people. In summary, we are still great Marrakesh fans. As a package, we still reckon it's hard to beat. It's supremely comfortable, it looks very casual, comes in lots of colours, it flows a lot of air and is sufficiently protective, especially if you upgrade to Level 2 Diablo. But it won't work for everybody. With its Level 2 Diablo, the Belstaff Tamar might be thought of as offering better value. It will also fit more people because it comes in more sizes. The Air VT from Rukka looks and feels very different. It isn't as comfortable, but it will fit almost everybody. And if the conversation turns to protection, then the Air VT kicks all the jackets we've mentioned here today into the weeds. Klim's own induction is also more protective than the Marrakesh, although not to the extent that the Rukka is. The question is whether it flows too much air for riding in the northern part of Europe. As ever, there are no right answers here. There are just options. But if you like the idea of layering, which will always entail starting out with a high airflow jacket of some description, come and see us. We are, I suppose, kind of the experts. What's more, we pretty much always have all the sizes and colours of all of the jackets that we've discussed here today in the shop. Work with us and we'll work out what the right solution is for you. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. If you'd like to see more high airflow jackets, and I'm sure we must have some, visit the website motorlegends.com. If you'd like to learn more about the Marrakesh, click on one of the links on the screen. Sometimes they're up there, sometimes they're down there. That will take you to a dedicated section on our website. Now, when you're there, you can check out the spec of the Marrakesh in a little bit more detail. You can check availability, and obviously you can buy a Marrakesh if you want to do that there and then. When you buy from us, we try to make the process as simple, straightforward and risk-free as we possibly can. There's no delivery charge on any item of protective wear that you buy from us. Returns are totally free, and what's more, we give you a full 12 months in which to decide whether you do want to return something to us. We have the best price promise in the business. Now, many years ago, John Lewis was rightly famed for its never knowingly undersold price promise. Well, we go one stage better. If you can find anybody selling anything that we sell at a price that is below ours, we will beat that competitor's price by a full 10%. Now, there are a few terms and conditions associated with what we call our price beat. Nothing particularly onerous, I can assure you. But if you are going to attempt to price beat us, I suggest you go over to the website and check out what those terms and conditions are. Now, if in the future you'd like to receive email bulletins from us about new products, then go to the website. At the top of the page, there's a piece of script that says newsletter sign up. Click on that. Within seconds, you'll be in business. In the future, you'll receive our email bulletins. If, however, you prefer to get your information videographically, and that is to say in this form, we'd be simply delighted if you wanted to become a subscriber to our YouTube channel, and you can do that by clicking on the button below. Finally, I'd like to make mention of our fabulous little shop here at Motor Legends. We're based about a mile from the centre of Guildford, a mile from the railway station. But even though the shop has a small footprint, we have more than £4 million worth of stock arranged over 3 floors in a warehouse that is attached to the shop. And technically that makes us the second largest motorcycle apparel shop in the UK. But we'd like to think of ourselves as far more than just a company with a large amount of merchandise here in the building. We're all about service, we're all about personal fitting. If you want to check us out, visit Trustpilot. We have the highest 5-star ranking in the business. And when you come to see us, we'll serve you only the finest Italian coffee, or we'll serve you proper Yorkshire tea in a proper teapot. And who knows, if you're really lucky, you might even get to sample one of our delicious motorcycle-shaped shortbread biscuits. Anyway, this has been Chris. I hope to talk to you again soon.